History is not what we were told it was. For the last 2,000 years, a massive filter has been placed over our past. We were taught to believe that certain human emotions, certain ways of loving, are brand new inventions. We were told they are modern trends, exceptions to a universal rule of history. But the dirt does not lie. The stone does not lie. The clay tablets dug out of the desert do not lie. When you clear away the layers of deliberate forgetting, you do not find a past that looks like a conservative textbook. You find something entirely different. You find that the oldest story ever written down by human hands is a love story between two men. It is an account of passion, of physical intimacy, and of a grief so violent it shattered a kingdom. It has been sitting in the dirt for 4,000 years, waiting for us to read exactly what it says. 4,000 years ago, in the ancient city of Uruk, a scribe pressed a sharp reed into wet clay. The civilization was Sumer. The place was what we now call Iraq. The script was cuneiform. This was the dawn of writing itself. Man was not yet writing complex legal codes or massive historical textbooks. Man was writing down an epic. And at the absolute center of this epic, the emotional spine that carries the entire narrative, is the bond between two men. Their names were Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Gilgamesh was a king. He was 2/3 god and 1/3 man. He was terrifyingly strong, completely unchecked and entirely alone. He ruled Uruk with a heavy hand because no one could match his power. He had no equal. The people cried out to the gods for relief. The gods listened. They did not send a weapon to destroy the king. They did not send an army to conquer his city. They did not send a plague. Instead, they took a handful of clay and dropped it into the wild. They created Enkidu. Enkidu was a wild man. He lived with the animals. He ran with the gazelles. He ate grass with the beasts of the field. He was raw nature, untouched by the corruption of the city. He was created specifically to be Gilgamesh's equal. He was the only being on earth who could look the king in the eye without fear. When these two forces met, the world shifted. They fought first. They wrestled like wild bulls. The ground shook. The doorposts of the city splintered under their weight. But as they wrestled, something broke inside both of them. The isolation ended. The text tells us that their struggle stopped. They looked at each other and they recognized themselves in the other person. The epic does not ask you to read between the lines. It does not hide its intent behind vague metaphors. It is not an allegory about friendship or a political alliance. The cuneiform characters are completely direct. The text describes Enkidu and Gilgamesh embracing. It explicitly says that Gilgamesh loved Enkidu like a man loves a woman. He held him. He kissed him. He brought him to his mother, the goddess Nin's son, and introduced him as his chosen companion. The word used in the ancient Akkadian text is the specific term for erotic, binding attachment. They became a single unit. They went on adventures together. They conquered monsters together. They redefined what it meant to live. Then the gods intervened again. Enkidu fell ill. It was not a hero's death in battle. It was a slow, agonizing sickness sent as a punishment by the divine. Gilgamesh sat by his bed. He watched the wildness drain out of the man who had made his life feel possible. He watched Enkidu's eyes go dark. When Enkidu took his last breath, Gilgamesh did not just mourn. His grief was a physical explosion. The text says it was the kind of grief that breaks the shape of a person. He stopped eating. He stopped washing his body. He tore off his royal robes and threw them into the dirt. He did not behave like a king maintaining his dignity. He behaved like a person who had lost half of his own flesh. Gilgamesh called upon the world to weep. He did not just command his court to cry. He commanded the rivers of Uruk to mourn. He commanded the mountains they had climbed together to weep. He called out to the animals, to the wild ass and the panther that had nursed Enkidu in the wild, telling them to break their silence with sorrow. He stood over the body of his lover, and the scribe records an extraordinary visual detail. Gilgamesh took a veil and covered Enkidu's face. He covered him like a bride. He paced around the body. He tore out his own hair by the roots. For 7 days and 7 nights, he refused to let them bury the corpse. He kept waiting for Enkidu to wake up. He stared at the face of his companion until he saw decay begin to set in. Only then did the reality hit him. The entire second half of the oldest story in human history is driven by this single loss. Gilgamesh leaves his throne. He leaves his city. He wanders into the wilderness alone, wearing nothing but the skins of wild beasts. He goes on a desperate quest to find the secret to immortality. But he does not do this out of an abstract, philosophical fear of death. He explicitly tells the people he meets on his journey why he is running. He says, "My friend whom I loved so dearly, who went through all hardships with me, Enkidu whom I loved so dearly, has turned to clay. Should I not weep? How can I be silent? I looked at his face and I saw what death will do to me." This is the baseline of human literature. It is not an exception. It is the beginning. It is a record of same-sex love written at the dawn of human civilization, documented on clay that survived the collapse of empires. The ancient world knew exactly what this bond was. They did not look away. They wrote it down. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe and share to support the channel. The clay of Mesopotamia tells one story, but the stone of Egypt tells another. To understand how deeply same-sex love was woven into the ancient world, we must travel west, away from the river valleys of Iraq and into the desert sands of Egypt. We must look at a civilization that was obsessed with order, obsessed with documentation, and obsessed with the afterlife. For centuries, modern historians looked at ancient Egypt through a highly selective lens. They focused on the great pharaohs, the massive pyramids, and the traditional family structures depicted on tomb walls. They told us that the Egyptian universe was strict, rigid, and entirely heterosexual. But in 1964, in the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, the sand gave up a secret that shattered that narrative completely. Archaeologists cleared away the debris from a rock-cut tomb that had been sealed for 4,400 years. This was the tomb of Nyanknum and Khnumhotep. These two men lived during the 5th dynasty, a period of immense wealth and architectural achievement. They were not kings, but they were men of incredibly high status. Their official title was overseers of the royal manicurists. To a modern ear that might sound minor. To the ancient Egyptians, it was a position of immense sacred trust. The pharaoh was considered a living god on earth. Anyone who was permitted to touch his physical body, to groom him, and to maintain his appearance held a position of profound intimacy and political influence. These two men were at the absolute center of the royal court. When they died, they were not buried separately. They were placed together in a single, lavishly decorated tomb. This in itself was a massive honor, but it is the imagery inside the tomb that provides the undeniable linguistic DNA of their lives. The central panel of the tomb's decorative program is one of the most remarkable artistic discoveries in human history. It does not show two friends standing side by side. It does not show two brothers shaking hands. It shows Nyanknum and Khnumhotep standing so close that their bodies touch. Their faces are brought together, and their noses are pressed against each other. In the visual vocabulary of ancient Egypt, this gesture, the touching of noses, is not an expression of casual affection. It is the specific, formalized iconographic symbol for intimate, romantic love. We see this exact same gesture used across thousands of years of Egyptian art, but in every other context, it is used to depict a pharaoh embracing his queen. It is used to show a god embracing his divine consort. It is the visual equivalent of a passionate kiss, a statement of romantic union intended to last for all of eternity. The two men did have wives and children. They are depicted in the tomb as well, but their placement tells the real story. The wives are painted as secondary figures. They are small, pushed to the periphery of the scenes, and in some parts of the tomb, their images were actually scraped away or painted over to make more room for the two men. The entire architectural and visual program of the monument is organized around the relationship between Nyanknum and Khnumhotep. Their names are even joined together in a pun that reads, "joined in life and joined in death." Early modern archaeologists tried desperately to explain this away. They claimed the two men must have been identical twins. They argued that the extreme intimacy was just an unusual expression of brotherly love. But Egyptologists have systematically dismantled that desperate defense. The art of the Old Kingdom does not depict brothers, even twins, in this manner. The tomb was a deliberate, public statement of a lifelong partnership between two men, validated by the court and preserved for the afterlife. This monument exists because ancient Egypt operated under a cosmic principle known as Ma'at. Ma'at is often translated as truth, justice, or balance. It was the organizing force of the entire Egyptian universe. The pharaoh's entire job was to maintain Ma'at, to keep the world in a state of perfect harmony. The Egyptians did not view human desire through a binary lens of right and wrong, or straight and deviant. They viewed the world through the lens of balance. If a relationship brought order, if it contributed to the stability of the household and the court, if it was lived with dignity, it was seen as an expression of Ma'at. The ancient Egyptian legal tradition confirms this. The Nile Valley has yielded thousands of legal documents, papyri detailing crimes, punishments, divorces, and property disputes. There are laws against theft. There are laws against assault. There are laws against violating religious taboos. But in the entire vast corpus of ancient Egyptian law, there is not a single line, not a single word that prohibits same-sex acts. The silence is absolute. It was not an oversight. In a society that legislated the exact dimensions of a field and the exact tax on a basket of grain, you do not forget to mention a crime. It wasn't mentioned because it wasn't a crime. Same-sex love was simply a recognized, accepted thread in the fabric of human experience. From the quiet, stone-carved tombs of the Nile, the axis of power shifted east. The ancient world did not remain isolated. Empires rose, swallowing the old kingdoms of Sumer and Egypt, creating vast networks of trade, culture, and governance. By the 6th century BCE, the largest empire the world had ever seen emerged from the mountains and plains of Iran. This was the Achaemenid Persian Empire. At its peak, it stretched from the borders of Greece all the way to the banks of the Indus River. It was a machine of administrative genius, ruling over dozens of distinct nations with a policy of cultural tolerance. And at the absolute center of this massive empire, within the golden courts of Persepolis and Susa, same-sex love was not just a private reality, it was an integrated feature of royal court culture. To understand Persia, we have to look through a complicated historical window. The Persians themselves wrote their history on monuments, focusing on conquests and divine right, but their daily court lives were documented extensively by their neighbors, the Greeks. The Greeks were often hostile to Persia. They viewed the Persian kings as tyrants and rivals. Yet, when Greek historians like Herodotus, Xenophon, and Ctesias sat down to write about the inner workings of the Persian court, they recorded a specific custom with complete consistency. They documented that the Persian kings and high-ranking nobles regularly kept beautiful young male companions at court. Herodotus, the famous traveler and historian, went so far as to claim that the Persians loved this practice so much that they adopted variations of it from the Greeks themselves. While Herodotus was biased, the underlying fact remains undisputed across all ancient sources. This was not a hidden vice or a scandalous secret whispered in the shadows of the palace. It was an established, institutionalized practice. These young male companions, often chosen for their exceptional beauty, intelligence, and poise, were high-ranking members of the imperial household. They were given intense training in court etiquette, diplomacy, and military arts. They stood beside the king during massive state banquets, traveled with him on military campaigns, and held positions of profound political influence because of their direct, unrestricted access to the royal ear. This courtly tradition was not a temporary phase. It was the foundation of a profound literary and cultural evolution that would shape the Middle East for thousands of years. From these ancient roots of courtly devotion and male beauty, the Persian civilization developed an extraordinary literary tradition. Centuries later, this tradition crystallized into the ghazal, a highly structured, beautifully expressive lyric poetic form that became the emotional heartbeat of Islamic literature. When you read a classical Persian ghazal, you are reading a poem dedicated entirely to the agony and ecstasy of love. The poetry is raw, intense, and deeply spiritual. But there is a crucial detail that modern translations often deliberately hide. In the original Persian language, nouns do not have grammatical gender. This allowed poets to write about the beloved with a beautiful universal ambiguity. However, the descriptive markers used in the oldest, most authentic ghazals leave no room for doubt. The poems explicitly describe the beloved as having a newly emerging beard, a youthful masculine jawline, and the physical grace of a young prince. The poets were writing about their desire for young men. This was not considered an alternative or fringe style of writing. It was the mainstream elite literature of the civilization. To love a beautiful youth was seen as a reflection of divine beauty on earth. The desire was handled with complete openness, celebrated in the finest royal courts, and copied by scribes across generations. It was a linguistic DNA that treated male same-sex desire not as a corruption of nature, but as its highest, most refined expression. The depth of this Persian understanding of love became historical reality during the collision between Persia and Greece. When Alexander the Great marched his armies into the heart of the Persian Empire, destroying the Achaemenid dynasty, he did not destroy their court culture. Instead, he absorbed it. Alexander himself was already living a life completely aligned with this ancient framework. His closest companion, his co-general, and the man he loved above all others was Hephaestion. They had been inseparable since childhood. When Alexander's army crossed into Asia, the first stop they made was at the ancient ruins of Troy. There, in a highly symbolic public ceremony, Alexander laid a decorative wreath on the tomb of the legendary hero Achilles. At the exact same moment, Hephaestion laid a wreath on the tomb of Patroclus. The ancient world did not need this gesture explained to them. In the cultural understanding of the time, Achilles and Patroclus were the ultimate symbol of two male warriors bonded by an intense, romantic love. By presenting themselves this way at the dawn of their conquest, Alexander and Hephaestion were announcing to their entire army, and to the world they were about to conquer, the exact nature of their bond. When they entered Persia, the Persian court observers did not look at Alexander and Hephaestion with confusion or moral outrage. They understood exactly who Hephaestion was. He was not just a general, he was the king's chosen partner. He was treated with the same royal honors as the king himself. Later, Alexander also took a beautiful Persian youth named Bagoas into his court, a relationship documented by Roman and Greek historians without shock or condemnation. The true intensity of this bond was revealed in 324 BCE, when Hephaestion suddenly fell ill and died in the city of Ecbatana, deep in Persian territory. Alexander's reaction was catastrophic. He did not behave like a military commander losing a trusted officer. He collapsed into a state of total, unhinged grief that mirrored the ancient story of Gilgamesh. He threw himself onto the body, weeping for hours. He ordered that his own hair be cut short in mourning. He ordered the manes and tails of all royal horses to be shorn across the empire. He banned all music, all celebration, and all laughter in the camps. He executed the physician who had failed to save him. Alexander did not hide his broken heart. He spent an absolute fortune building an enormous, towering funeral pyre in Babylon, a structure that was multiple stories high and decorated with golden sculptures. He sent messengers across the Mediterranean to the holy oracle of Siwa in Egypt, demanding to know if Hephaestion could be worshipped as a god. The oracle responded that Hephaestion could be revered as a divine hero. Instantly, Alexander ordered temples and shrines to be constructed in Hephaestion's memory across every province of his vast empire. He spent the remaining months of his life in a dark, hollow mourning, failing to ever recover from the loss. He died less than 8 months later. The history of the world was altered because an emperor lost the person who made his life possible, and the ancient world documented every single tear. The fire that consumed Alexander's empire was fueled by a cultural engine that had been perfected in the city-states of Greece. When modern textbooks discuss ancient Greece, they often treat its philosophy, its democracy, and its military brilliance as completely separate from its social realities. They frame Greek love as a quirky historical footnote, a minor habit confined to the margins of society. But the records show the exact opposite. Same-sex love was not a loophole in the Greek system. It was the system. It was the structural concrete that held their cities, their armies, and their democracies together. To see this clearly, we have to look directly at the law. We must look at Athens in the 6th century BCE, at the very birth of what we now call Western civilization. Solon was the great lawgiver of Athens. His legal reforms are celebrated as the foundation of Athenian democracy. He was a man obsessed with order, structure, and civic virtue. When Solon sat down to write the legal code of Athens, he did not ignore same-sex relationships. He explicitly legislated them. His laws did not ban relationships between men and youths, they regulated them. They specified the age parameters. They laid out the exact obligations an older man had toward a younger man. They created strict protections to ensure that the younger partner was not exploited or mistreated. The law treated the older man not just as a lover, but as a mentor responsible for teaching the youth civic duty, martial skills, and personal honor. If you are trying to eliminate a behavior from your society, you pass a prohibition. You do not spend pages of a legal code structuring it, normalizing it, and wrapping it in protective citizen rights. Solon wrote these laws because Athens viewed this bond as an essential tool for creating good citizens. The physical landscape of Greece was designed around this belief. The absolute center of social life in any Greek city was the gymnasium. This was not just a modern fitness center. It was a massive, government-funded civic institution. It was a place of education, philosophy, and intense athletic training. The word gymnasium literally means the place of nakedness, because Greek athletes trained completely without clothing. The gymnasium was designed specifically to be a space where older men and younger men observed each other, evaluated each other, and initiated relationships. It was the civic heart of the city, a place where desire was not hidden behind locked doors but brought into the bright sunlight. The Greeks believed that the mutual attraction between men was completely natural, and that by giving it a structured, culturally approved arena, they could harness that erotic energy to build a stronger society. No text states this philosophy more clearly than Plato's Symposium, the most famous document on love in human history. The setting is a dinner party where 7 of the most brilliant minds of Athens gather to give speeches about eros, desire. They do not spend their time talking about marriage or the love between men and women. The entire dialogue is an explicit, unapologetic celebration of same-sex love between men. Phaedrus opens the discussion by calling Eros the oldest of the gods. He argues that a bond between male lovers is the source of the greatest virtue on earth. He states that an army made of male lovers would be completely invincible, because a man would rather die 1,000 deaths than behave dishonorably in front of his beloved. Aristophanes follows with a brilliant myth, explaining that humans were originally double beings split in half by the gods, and that men who seek out other men are the most noble of their generation because they possess the truest masculine spirit. Finally, Socrates delivers his famous argument. He says that all love begins with the physical attraction to a beautiful body, but that the highest form of human understanding, wisdom itself, is achieved when that physical desire is elevated into a shared pursuit of truth. And he makes it completely clear that this intellectual and spiritual ascent is possible only through the love between 2 men. For 1500 years, Western traditionalists tried to erase this text. They invented the term Platonic love, to pretend that Plato meant a completely sexless, purely intellectual friendship. But that is a deliberate lie. Plato wrote about passion. He wrote about physical beauty. He wrote about the literal, burning desire of one man for another, and he used that desire as the engine for his entire philosophy. If Athens used same-sex love to build its mind, Sparta used it to build its shield. The Spartan military machine was the most feared force in the ancient world, and it was engineered entirely around same-sex bonds. In the Spartan educational system, the agoge, an older warrior, would choose a younger youth to be his companion. This was a formal, state-mandated relationship. The older warrior was held completely responsible for the younger man's conduct. If the youth cried out in pain during training or if he showed cowardice on the battlefield, it was the older lover who was publicly fined and shamed by the government. The state intentionally designed its incentive structure so that love, honor, and shame flowed directly between the bonded pair. They knew that a soldier would fight with savage ferocity if the person he loved most was watching his every move. This military logic reached its absolute perfection a generation later in the city of Thebes. In 378 BC, A Theban general named Gorgidas formed an elite military unit known as the Sacred Band of Thebes. This was not a standard infantry unit. It was comprised of exactly 150 male couples, 300 elite warriors bonded in romantic partnerships. For 40 years, the Sacred Band was completely undefeated. They were the shock troops of Thebes. They broke the legendary power of Sparta at the Battle of Leuctra. They marched into the teeth of the most dangerous armies of the age and won because they fought not just for a flag, but for the life of the person standing right next to them. When they finally fell at the Battle of Kyrenia in 338 BCE, wiped out by the professional army of Philip of Macedon, they died together, side by side, matching their ranks perfectly in death. Philip, standing over their corpses after the battle, looked at the 300 men lying in pairs and wept. He turned to his generals and said, "Perish any man who suspects that these men either did or suffered anything unseemly." The ancient world did not look at the Sacred Band as a controversial, experimental anomaly. They looked at them as the highest, most logical expression of a world built on the power of male desire. While the Greeks built philosophies around desire, the Romans built a machine. Rome was a civilization defined by raw pragmatism, absolute hierarchy, and the ruthless management of power. They did not sit in gymnasiums theorizing about the cosmic nature of love. They conquered, they legislated, and they organized. But if you look beneath the heavy armor of the Roman state, you do not find a society that suppressed same-sex desire. You find a world where it was entirely ordinary, woven directly into the daily mechanics of the empire. To read the linguistic DNA of Rome, you must understand a single, uncompromising rule: status was everything. A freeborn Roman male citizen was defined by his power. He was the master of his household, the ruler of his subordinates, and the ultimate authority. In the sexual framework of Rome, a citizen's dignity was maintained by remaining dominant. A Roman man was fully expected to experience and act upon desire for both women and men, provided he maintained his position of authority. His attraction to other men carried absolutely no social stigma, no shame, and no legal penalty as long as his partners were of an appropriate lower social status: slaves, freedmen, or foreign captives. Modern apologists often point to an ancient Roman law called the Lex Scantinia as proof that Rome criminalized same-sex love. But that is a complete misreading of the record. The Lex Scantinia was not a law against same-sex attraction. It was a law protecting freeborn Roman citizen boys from being treated like slaves. It protected citizen status against physical degradation. The crime was not loving another man. The crime was violating the sacred status of a Roman citizen. Same-sex behavior itself was so profoundly ordinary that it was painted, scratched, and carved into the very walls of the empire. If you walk through the ruins of Pompeii, a city frozen in time by the volcanic eruption of 79 CE, the walls speak with total honesty. The graffiti preserved under the ash shows the unedited sexual lives of ordinary Roman people. Men wrote openly on public walls about their longings, their trysts, and their passions for other men. These inscriptions do not use coded language. They do not read like desperate secrets written in the dark. They are casual, frank, and utterly lacking in shame. They are the thoughts of people who knew their desires were a normal part of the landscape. The greatest literature of Rome confirms this casual acceptance. The poet Catullus, one of the masters of Latin verse, wrote intensely passionate love poetry. He directed his poems to a woman named Lesbia, but he also directed an entire cycle of deeply erotic, yearning poems to a young man named Juventius. Catullus was not viewed as a social outcast or a medical anomaly for writing these verses. He was celebrated as the voice of his generation. His poems to Juventius were copied, studied, and preserved by Roman society alongside his poems to Lesbia for hundreds of years. The poet Martial, writing a century later, filled his epigrams with blunt, satirical, and highly explicit depictions of Roman sexual variety. Same-sex desire in Martial's world is everywhere. It is joked about, argued over, and celebrated with the exact same casual indifference that characterized any other human emotion. This reality went all the way to the top of the imperial hierarchy. The histories written by Suetonius and Tacitus document the lives of the Roman emperors with brutal, unvarnished detail. They were not shy about criticizing an emperor's moral failings or political excesses. Yet, when they record the same-sex relationships of the rulers, they do so with a matter-of-fact tone that startles modern readers. Julius Caesar was famously teased by his own soldiers for a youthful relationship with the king of Bithynia. Augustus, the restorer of traditional Roman family values, faced similar accusations. The Emperor Trajan, one of Rome's greatest military commanders, was widely known for his love of beautiful young men. Pliny the Younger describes Trajan's male favorites in his letters with complete indifference, mentioning it as a simple trait of character, not a disqualification for rule. But the most monumental expression of same-sex love in Western history occurred during the reign of the Emperor Hadrian. Hadrian was a brilliant administrator, a restless traveler, and the ruler of an empire at its absolute zenith. In the year 123 CE, while touring the Greek provinces, Hadrian met a beautiful young man named Antinous. The two became inseparable. Antinous traveled with the emperor across the world, standing by his side from the borders of Scotland to the deserts of Libya. In 130 CE, while sailing down the Nile River in Egypt, tragedy struck. Antinous fell into the water and drowned under mysterious circumstances. Hadrian's grief was not a private matter. It was an imperial cataclysm. The ancient historians record that the emperor wept openly, crying like a woman, completely unconcerned with maintaining his stoic Roman dignity. Hadrian did not just mourn. He used the entire administrative weight of the Roman Empire to immortalize the person he loved. On the banks of the Nile, at the very spot where the youth had died, Hadrian founded a massive, magnificent new city and named it Antinopolis. He commissioned thousands of marble statues, busts, and coins bearing Antinous' idealized face, distributing them to every province from Britannia to Syria. More extraordinary still, Hadrian deified him. He established a state-sanctioned religious cult centered around the worship of Antinous. Temples were erected, priests were ordained, and massive athletic games were held in his honor. For more than 2 centuries, people across the Mediterranean basin prayed to, made sacrifices to, and built monuments for Antinous. He became the last great pagan god of the ancient world. He was a youth who was loved by an emperor, and his face was carved into the visual memory of Western history because Rome saw nothing to hide. To see the full picture of the ancient world, we must look beyond the Mediterranean basin. The tradition of accepting, documenting, and celebrating same-sex love was not a European or Middle Eastern phenomenon. If we travel thousands of miles east, across the ancient trade routes to China, we find an independent civilization that recorded its history with unmatched precision. And in the archives of the great Chinese dynasties, same-sex love was treated with a lyrical beauty entirely free from the harsh status hierarchies of Rome or the rigid physical divisions of Greece. The Chinese records simply describe love. The Han dynasty ruled China from 206 BCE to 220 CE, a period exactly contemporary with the rise and height of the Roman Empire. It was a golden age of poetry, philosophy, and massive bureaucratic statecraft. When the historian Ban Gu compiled the Han Shu, the official history of the Han dynasty, he dedicated an entire chapter to the intimate companions of the rulers. This was not a collection of scandalous rumors or court gossip. It was an official administrative record. The Han Shu documents that out of the first 10 emperors of the Han dynasty, every single one had an intimate male companion who lived at court, held high administrative rank, and influenced imperial policy. Emperor Gao, the fierce warlord who founded the dynasty, had his beloved Jiru. Emperor Wen, celebrated as one of the most benevolent and wise rulers in Chinese history, loved Deng Tong, a man of humble origins whom the emperor made one of the wealthiest figures in the empire. These relationships were viewed by Confucian scholars not as moral failures, but as a normal feature of imperial life. They were simply how emperors were. The defining moment of this Chinese literary tradition occurred during the reign of Emperor Ai of Han, near the turn of the millennium. The emperor had a favorite companion named Dong Xian, a young official of exceptional grace and devotion. The Han Shu records a quiet domestic moment that would provide the linguistic DNA for same-sex love in China for the next 2,000 years. One afternoon, Emperor Ai woke from a nap to find that Dong Xian had fallen asleep beside him, resting his head on the long flowing sleeve of the emperor's formal silk robe. The emperor needed to rise to attend to matters of state. Rather than wake his sleeping companion, Emperor Ai took his ceremonial sword and cleanly sliced off his own sleeve. This gentle, protective act, the cut sleeve, instantly became a legendary symbol. For 2 millennia, whenever a Chinese poet, historian, or ordinary citizen wanted to refer to male same-sex love, they did not use words of judgment or clinical definitions. They simply spoke of the passion of the cut sleeve, or the southern wind. It was a tradition built on tenderness, celebrated in the highest forms of classical literature, and entirely unpunished by the state or religion. The ancient world, across 8 distinct civilizations, had reached a profound consensus. From the clay tablets of Sumer to the rock-cut tombs of Egypt, from the golden courts of Persia to the gymnasiums of Athens, from the public walls of Pompeii to the imperial archives of China, and into the sacred temple walls of ancient India, the record was clear. Same-sex love was comprehensively documented, structurally integrated, and openly celebrated. The question we must ask is a simple one. How did we end up with a version of history that presented all of this as non-existent? How did we inherit a world that treats these ancient realities as marginal outliers or modern trends? The answer is a specific historical pivot point with a specific cause. The Roman Empire converted to Christianity. As Christian theology developed in the late Roman period and solidified during the medieval era, it introduced a concept that was entirely absent from every single civilization in this survey. It did not condemn same-sex desire as a violation of citizen status like Rome had, or as a matter of civic balance like Egypt. It condemned it as a violation of natural law, a supreme sin against the divine order of creation. When this specific theological framework became the operating system of European civilization, it completely reshaped the legal and cultural landscape. The emperors Constantius II and Theodosius issued the first sweeping imperial decrees criminalizing same-sex behavior. By the 6th century, the Emperor Justinian codified these laws, making same-sex acts punishable by death. In a span of less than 300 years, a 1,000-year tradition of open acceptance was systematically crushed. But the erasure did not stop in Europe. When European powers built the largest colonial empires the world had ever seen, they exported this specific theological condemnation to every corner of the earth. In 1861, the British Empire imposed Section 377 of the Penal Code onto India, criminalizing relationships that had been openly carved into the sacred temple walls of Khajuraho centuries before. They wrote similar laws for their colonies across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The laws that criminalize same-sex love in dozens of countries across the globe today are not the expressions of ancient local traditions. They are not indigenous values. They are European imports. They are specific, datable legal codes written in the 18th and 19th centuries by colonial administrators who believed they were correcting the moral landscape of the world. What the ancient world tells us is that they were wrong. Not just morally but historically. There was never a universal human tradition of condemning same-sex desire. The mainstream record of human history is a record of structuring it, honoring it, and building civilizations powerful enough to last thousands of years around the full reality of human passion. The evidence has never shifted. It is in the tablets, the papyri, the inscriptions, the poetry, and the tombs. It has always been there, entirely permanent, waiting beneath the sand. When Gilgamesh covered the body of Enkidu with a veil like a bride, the ancient world knew exactly what it meant. It took 2,000 years of determined erasing to make it seem like something that needed to be explained. If you enjoy dark untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.